Right, so welcome back to this course on basic biology for engineers and big data analysis. Uh, as we are now in the second week of the course, and you have seen that how we can utilize different biomolecules and analyze them for understanding human health and diseases. And last week the focus was more on the DNA and genes. This week we'll talk more about amino acids, proteins, and proteome. And of course, for understanding these and to utilize them to the best possible strength, we need to utilize a lot of technologies. And all of those technologies with various type of clinical samples are eventually going to generate a lot of big data. And that's what you will see, like, from these instrument platforms, how to generate this kind of big data and analyze that subsequently. So just to get everybody started on the same page, I'm sure all of you have good background of chemistry and you already are aware of details of amino acids and proteins. But let me refresh you about these concepts before I move on to the proteomics. So we'll just first talk about basics of amino acids and proteins. What are different levels of protein structures? How the field of proteomics got benefited from genomics, but still what are the additional information which we can obtain, understanding the biological problems at the protein level. And then, of course, I will move on to studying the proteins at the high throughput level using proteomics. So just to give overview again, we were talking about how the human body is composed of billions of cells, and each of those cells contains these nucleus, and within those nucleus we have nuclear material where we have DNA and RNA. So the process of transcription, which makes the DNA to RNA form, and then the translation, which is the RNA to the protein forms. This entire thing constitutes the central dogma because information has to flow from the static genes to the dynamic ribonucleic acid and the protein forms. And these are the ones which are more functional molecules, which perform, depending on the given stress condition, given disease condition, they take those, dynamic action to cope up to the body's requirement and the physiological requirements. So proteins are the functional entities which are going to encode and perform all the coded messages which are coming from the RNA, which has in turn generated from the DNA. So let's just quickly refresh ourselves on amino acids and proteins. Again, as I said, I don't need to give more detail to this audience, but when we are discussing about DNA, then we looked into the four different type of base pairs, ATGCs. But in case of protein studying, we are looking at building blocks, amino acids, and these are much larger in number. We have 20 amino acids. And so therefore, if you think about studying the information at the genome level or looking at only the DNA level versus information at the protein level, the magnitude is very different. We are talking about 4 base pairs versus 20 amino acids to start with. And therefore, that is one of the major challenge. Second, I talked to you briefly about studying for DNA. Even if you have a very small amount or low amount of DNA present, you can amplify that DNA by using polymerase chain reaction or other kind of cloning methods. Now, as a result, even on the forensic side, when you do not have too much of nucleic acid material, you can still amplify that and use that for further investigations. However, that is not possible when we talk about amino acids and proteins, because here we do not have the technologies which can amplify the proteins right away or amplify the amino acids. So therefore, we are quite limited in that way to study the proteins. We have to rely on our technologies which can generate sufficient amount of proteins to study the dynamic proteome. So when we are talking about amino acids here, so these are, as you already know, there are different acidic, basic, different amino acids. Now these amino acids, they are going to form the bonds, which is known as peptide bonds. And these peptide bonds are the one which is going to form these polypeptide chains linking various amino acids. So just a simple example here for two different amino acids, the carboxy terminal and the amino terminal, they are coming together, and as you can see, CONH is the peptide bond which is formed, and that accompanies the loss of water. So these are all, I'm sure, very basic and refresher for all of you. So likewise, when there are many amino acids which are forming the polypeptide chains, which is now the linear polymers built of monomers, uh, these proteins are going to have a variety of functional groups coming from these amino acids, and therefore they can do different type of functions and different type of enzymatic properties, enzymatic role uh, is possible because of these functional groups, which is providing these speciality to these proteins. Proteins also perform different roles given the nature of proteins interactions with other proteins, or proteins other biomolecular interaction with DNA or carbohydrates or lipids. So therefore proteins are very dynamic and they can perform many role. Uh, and when they work in a given cascade, when many proteins are actually involved to transduce that information, that is known as signal transduction, and that of course is not possible by studying an individual protein. So if you really want to understand what is happening in human body or any other life science system, then you have to think about proteins in totality. And you have to look at not only one protein and its activity at a time, but also how that one protein interacts with other given proteins, as well as different type of biomolecular interactions, which is happening simultaneously in our body to provide these functional information. So proteins transform these amino acid sequences, which is in the one-dimensional sequence, to the three-dimensional functional molecules. And given the nature of the side chains, they can perform variety of function, which is quite crucial for us to cope up with different type of diseases, different type of pathogen attack, different type of stress conditions to cope up with. All of those are possible because of the different functional groups which are involved as a part of these proteins. So proteins are, a good team player. They are going to work in many of the signaling pathways. And therefore, if we are looking at individual protein that usually is not able to do many function alone, and they are going to look at synergistic capability to work in the team. And it just showed here one example of insect flight tissue, which is having two kind of protein filaments shown in the dark and the light dots of black color here, and they are forming these hexagonal arrays. So just show that even for something simple like this, there are different kind of protein filaments which is working together to provide that information. Of course, proteins have a lot of other properties. Sometimes they're rigid, sometimes they're flexible. We have the cytoskeletal elements, which are the structural element which are rigid, which provides us the backbone. And likewise, as I mentioned earlier, that if we have the cell within the cell takes a position or a shape that is possible because of different proteins like actin, myosin, some of these cytoskeletal elements. And of course, there are many flexible proteins which are important to transduce the information from one to other cells or within the cells. And one example shown here, which is for the lactoferrin protein, iron binding protein, which is after binding with the iron molecule, it shows some conformational changes, which is quite required for certain functions. So understanding these kind of details of amino acid sequences and looking at different type of protein function is quite important to understand any biological questions. Because if you think about diseases, most of the disease happens because of abnormalities which are coming from the proteins or the protein malfunctioning which is happening. And many of the pharmaceutical drugs, they are actually trying to target the proteins or sometimes their proteins themselves for the therapies. So in this way, you can see the significance of studying the proteins. So I'm hoping some of these things are quite basic, but that at least gives all of you the perspective that how one should think about before going to very big pictures of the looking at complex technologies. How one should first think about putting the information in the basic format and look at the very crucial elements, which is starting from amino acids and proteins, and where we are trying to relate this information in the central dogma formation, where information starts from the genetic blueprint. I'm just giving a simple example here that you want to make a building. Let's say we are in IIT Bombay in Powai, and we want to make a new building here. So first we have to identify a location, which is we are near the Powai Lake. So an architect will come and look at this location, that where this building has to be made. So this is the work which is in our body being done by DNA, which is the genetic blueprint. Now, once that location is decided, then now you have these these structures made, which is going to provide the molecular photocopy, and those are the RNA molecules, which will be utilized for making more functional information. And now, once you have these kind of maps made by the architect, then only you can get the the mortar and bricks to make the buildings, and those are the proteins which is making the building blocks. So this is how you can think about different type of molecules, how crucial they are, and how they are able to provide the information from the each one of them are very crucial to say, but looking at the genetic blueprints to moving to the molecular photocopies to making the proteins building blocks. So proteins are, as I mentioned, that they are quite important, because you name any activity happening in our cell, in our body, it's all getting coordinated because of different proteins, which are playing important role, from signaling molecules to looking at the transport, looking at catalysis of enzymes, or movement like cytoskeletal elements, structural elements, various type of regulatory proteins. So they really perform wide range of the functions. And if they do not work properly, if they have some malfunctioning, that is going to result into some disease. So again, on the basic side, you are aware of that when we have these amino acid sequences, when they are forming these primary structure based on the free amino acids, that is just the linear sequence of amino acids, which is providing that information of how these amino acids are forming that particular sequence for that given protein. That this does not provide any functional information, but it just gives us the composition of that given protein, that which are all sequences of the amino acids are part of that. So in this case, you can see there are 5 free amino acids, and they are forming this polypeptide chain. And as a result, they are releasing 4 water molecules after condensation reaction happening. And this gives rise to the primary structure. So the linear sequence of these amino acids are going to provide us primary structure of proteins, which is quite essential, because now all the information starts building from this primary structure only. And the primary structure is going to dictate how the 3-dimensional structure of the proteins are going to be. So, and many times you will also notice in some diseases that some amino acids may have some change, some alteration, and just that one amino acid change in that protein sequence could be very detrimental. I'm sure you would have thought about some disease examples by now, but we will talk about as I go along. So these could be very important to look at even the the primary amino acid sequence. And if you start analyzing the primary amino acid sequences using bioinformatic tools, you'll be surprised to see that how much you can understand the evolution of that protein or different organisms where these proteins belong to. So a lot of information at the amino acid sequence level could be very powerful, which could provide information not only to look at the 3-dimensional structure, but also giving us the disease aspect as well as evolutionary history. Secondary structures, as you're already aware of, we have the alpha helix and beta sheets. Now these alpha helix are stabilized by these hydrogen bonds, which is forming after the 4 amino acid residues apart. And the beta sheet, you are different types of these are there, parallel and anti-parallel, and they're composed of 2 or more polypeptide chains. Again, some of these things I understand that all of you have at least some chemistry background, so I'll not spend much time on it. But given that we are going to talk about complex protein structures and proteome, it's, I think, important to at least refresh some of these concepts as well. So tertiary structures of proteins, which is actually the 3-dimensional folded structure of the protein. And these are showing that, what is overall organization of different type of interaction which is happening, what is overall folded structure of the proteins are. Many of these informations can be obtained at the tertiary structure level. And finally, you see the quaternary structure, which shows various type of interactions happening between the proteins, which is forming multi-subunit complexes. And the hemoglobin is another classical example where you can see 2 alpha subunits and 2 beta subunits, and how they are forming the spatial arrangements of these subunits and their interactions, which is forming this functional protein hemoglobin. So just to recap what we have discussed so far, essentially we looked at primary structure from the different amino acid residues, which just gives us the linear information but dictates eventually the three-dimensional structure. It also provides a lot of information that how proteins are going to be functional, how proteins are going to have more evolutionary relationship. Secondary structures provides actually a lot of very interesting information, which is important for the protein folding and eventually many other protein characteristics. Tertiary structure, we looked at various domains which are quite crucial even when you study the complex diseases. Quaternary structure is looking at all those interactions and how these proteins are assembled from different subunits. So this is just a basic refresher what we have discussed so far. Now, very briefly, I will talk to you about when we talk about complex experiments. When we want to study all the proteins of a given organism, our sample preparation becomes very important. And while I'm not going to talk in detail about sample preparation right now, that's not the context. But given we are talking about proteins, I just thought to convey you when we are talking about proteomics, which means we want to study almost all the proteins present in a given cell or a given organism, then we are not looking at the three-dimensional structure of the proteins. We are looking at peptide sequences of those proteins. So the sample prep actually involves that, while we want to extract all the proteins from a given sample, just think about a practical problem. Let's say, somebody suffering from COVID, right? And now, the clinicians are taking their blood samples. From blood, the plasma is taken out. And now plasma contains maybe thousands of proteins. Now, from these thousands of protein, you want to study what is happening to the interleukin, what happens to certain other markers, which could indicate that how a patient might be more prone for the disease severity, or whether a patient is actually just mild. So these kind of information now you want to look from not only one protein, but the complex of all the proteins present in the plasma, but you want to specifically analyze some proteins to get these kind of biological clues. So for doing this kind of work, especially when we are looking at high throughput analysis of proteins in proteomics, you are going to digest your proteins to the peptide forms. So all the analysis which we do in proteomics are essentially, not all, but at least most of it, based on the peptide sequence analysis, not the full length proteins or not looking at the globular proteins. So here first you want to denature your proteins. You want to break open the disulfide bond with the reduction process. You want to make sure that you are treating with iodosteroid so that they are not oxidizing again and not reforming these bonds. And then you are digesting your proteins with the enzyme like chymotrypsin or trypsin. Trypsin is most commonly used enzyme, which works mainly at the carboxy terminal when you have the lysine arginine residues. So finally, you have now, let's say in a tube, you took the plasma sample, which may have, for example, 1000 protein. And now you have added this enzyme trypsin. So now this is going to chop down all those 1000 proteins, wherever it sees lysine arginine in their polypeptide chains, and make maybe 10,000 peptides, for example. Now these 10,000 peptides are one which we are going to analyze simultaneously in very complex instruments like mass spectrometers. So now our understanding of protein sequences, amino acid sequences, looking at protein, various structural changes, many of these fundamentals becomes crucial, but now we are going to utilize that at the more complex level, at more high level, high throughput instrumentation level. So now we have these complex protein mixtures. I'm not talking about one protein, complex protein mixtures, which we have digested. And after digestion, we have got these peptide forms. These peptides, we are separating them using liquid chromatography based methods. There could be different ways of doing liquid chromatography. And then from there, we want to ionize our proteins or the peptides so that they can move inside the mass analyzers. And then we are going to analyze what is their mass to charge ratio, how to obtain in between the first analyzer and second analyzer, you have a collision cell, which actually what I'm talking right now. So these collision cells, they are going to provide the collision energy. And over there, now you are going to fragment these peptide bonds, which is going to generate either B ions or the Y ions. And these Y ions are the one which are retained towards the carboxy terminal, and the B ions are the one which are retained towards the amino terminal. Some of these things I will come back again and refresh you, so please do not get panic if you are not able to follow completely. But I'm just trying to give you the idea that what we studied, the amino acid sequences, those are crucial because even in the complex instruments, we are going to deduce those sequences. So then once we generate this kind of data set using mass spectrometer, which now shows us the Y and B ion patterns, we are going to look at what is the difference of these amino acids, difference of these Y ions and B ions, and based on those we are able to derive what is amino acids which are giving us this difference, like glycine in this case for the Y7 minus Y6, or glutamic acid for Y6 minus Y5. And similarly, we are trying to correlate that with the B ion series as well. So again, this part I'm going to come back again and talk to you in the right context. I just wanted to give a flavor to you here that even the complex instruments, they are going to take the complex proteins, chop it down to the peptide forms, and those peptides which are having the amino acids, now you are going to analyze those in the mass spectrometer, and you are finding what is the sequence of this peptide with these amino acids. And eventually you are going to put together these peptide sequences and going to search in the database that which of these proteins which I am talking about. So you are not looking at the full length protein and directly searching in the database. You are, dissecting it out. You are, cutting it short, and then finally using those sequences and then searching the databases to find out the proteins what you have. We will do some of this exercise as we go along in the some hands-on session, so you will have much better idea what I'm talking about. So we talked in the last week mainly about the understanding DNA and the genomics technology, how they have evolved. Question is, and why, if we already got information for all the gene sequences, which is giving the blueprint of life, which is providing all the information, so why we still need to search for the the proteins and all the proteome of a given organism? So I must say that genomics was very important project. Human genome sequencing and other sequencing projects, they actually gave rise to the reference sequences in the databases, from which now one could actually translate and derive the potential amino acid and protein sequences. So that was really important for even the field to develop, to do more and more type of analysis, and all the bioinformatic tools, lot of things developed only based on the genome sequences which is available. So after genomics work, there are different type of omic technologies have come forward, and as the one subtitle of the course is also about omics. So just to give you a flavor that when we talk about omics, it means we are looking at all the molecules present in a given system. So in a given cell or a given organ or a given organism, we are looking at all the genes of a given organism, that is genome. So we say human genome, it means we are looking at all the genes present in the human body, which is around 20,000, which we know by now. RNA, when we want to study all the RNA, that is known as transcriptome, and studying that comes under the transcriptomics field. When we want to look at all the transcripts, global transcriptomics. When we want to look at transcripts or the RNA present in a given cell, that is known as cellular transcriptomics. Likewise, when you want to study all the proteins, you are studying the proteome, and you are studying that in the field of proteomics, global, or looking at the cell only specific cells, that is cellular proteome. Or you can also go one step forward, which is looking at metabolites which are derived from these, and then you can look at the metabolome and studies under the metabolomics field. So I hope these terminologies are now clear to you. And as we have been discussing about some of the omic approaches, but also now it will be more heavy in this week. So you will be now able to relate that we are talking about the central dogma of life, but a different level. Like this one, DNA, RNA to protein, we talked about central dogma. Now we are talking about the same information, but not at one gene, one RNA, one protein level, but looking at all the genes possibility, all the transcript possibility, and looking at potentially all the proteins. So this is where the big change which you will see, and therefore our spectrum to analyze this kind of data requires a lot of new technologies and new algorithms to do this kind of data analysis. So question was that, when the Human Genome Project was getting completed, along with that, we have multiple other organisms like Drosophila melanogaster, C. elegans, we have Arabidopsis thaliana, and Homo sapiens. All of them were actually simultaneously getting sequenced, and we were hoping that, human will have really large number of genes, which is much different than other simple organisms. But human did not have that many different number of genes, and also the human, chimpanzee, they had very similar sequences. So many of these things provided a lot of useful information, undoubtedly, but it also gave some disappointment that we cannot understand the functionality of the human system versus the mouse versus other organism, because the number of genes are quite similar and quite few. The numbers are not many. So we have to look at more functional information, the central dogma, probably look at more transcript level or more at the protein level to explain that why different biological systems are different level of complexity they have. So I gave this example in the last week in some context. Again, to refresh you what we are talking now, if you look at this example of butterfly, is starting from larva, pupa, different stages of pupa, adult, and then adult butterfly. Or if you look at the frog, which is starting from the larval stage and finally makes to the adult frog, which is very different from the aqueous system to aquatic system going to the land terrestrial system. There's a huge change here, and so is huge change here. But in both of them, the genome remains static. So the gene information throughout all the life cycle stages are same, but what is different is the protein which is dynamically changing and giving the organism to cope up with different developmental stages or different environmental conditions. So both of these can only be possible given the dynamic nature of the proteins which are part of this to govern these systems. So this is where you can keep your in your mind clearly that the genes are important, they are giving blueprint, but proteins are giving more functionality, more dynamic behavior. And as a result, we can take this example and keep in our mind to explain why we need to still study the protein or the proteome while we already have some idea for the genome. Also, at the little bit more molecular level, what happens when we are looking at the transcription and translation processes, there are several changes that are happening. For example, from the pre-mRNA to the RNA formation, we have these exons and introns, which is the non-coding and the coding regions. And during the splicing process, now these introns are going to come out and these exons, they are going to come together to make the mature mRNA forms. But they do not come in a very specific sequence. These exons can come together in different combinations, and that is comes because of the alternative splicing formation. So now, as you can see from these color codes, we have exon 1, exon 2, exon 3, exon 4. Now one mature mRNA is being formed from the exon 1, 2, and 4. Other form from the 1, 3, and 4. For other combination also exist. So it means from one gene, now you got two different type of mature RNA molecules. And then each one of those are going to give rise to the protein formation. So now from the same gene, you got two different type of protein, protein A and protein B. So alternative splicing is the process by which exons or the coding sequences of the pre-mRNA are produced by the transcription of a gene, which are combined in different ways during the alternative splicing process. And therefore, the mature mRNA, they're going to give rise to different protein products. And therefore, if you want to relate now that why we are talking about genome are simple, proteomes are complex, because now multiple proteins can be formed from this. But keep in mind now that we have made now two proteins from one gene, one possibility. But even further to that, now every protein can get modified. And these modifications can happen at the after translation process being completed. And now different other residue, different other molecules could actually come and get attached to these proteins. For example, phosphate residue could get attached to the proteins, forming the phosphorylation, or the sugar or the glucose molecule, they come attached and they give rise to glycosylation form. Or you can have the methyl groups and they can give rise to protein methylation or hydroxyl form hydroxylation. And likewise, there are many other type of modification, including ubiquitination and other type of PTMs, which is happening. So now Same protein, you can see like the trajectory can give rise to multiple dynamic type of PTM forms. So this actually gives you some idea that now what we are going to talk is actually slightly more complex than just looking at one protein at a time. So proteomics is essentially the study of proteins and their properties to provide an integrated view of the cellular processes. And what we are looking at the proteome, which is set of all the proteins which are expressed by a genome, right? So for doing that, we are looking at much more bigger level of properties. We are looking at where proteins are modified, where they are localized, how they interact, and how they govern the protein function. So many of these properties are crucial to study the dynamic nature of the proteins. All right, so welcome to the world of proteomics. Let me show you this video clip to excite you that what we are studying and going to study, how interesting that is.
Be a muscle. Make a bone. Carry nerve signals. DNA tells our cells exactly what to do and when to do it. That's why DNA is often called the blueprint for life. But how do our genes give such orders? Each gene consists of a recipe for a certain protein. Proteins are the machines and workhorses of our body. Proteins trigger cells to perform specific tasks, enabling the cells in your eyes to function differently from the cells in your heart or brain.
Our bodies are made up of about 100 trillion cells, which each contain thousands of different proteins. The collection of proteins within a cell is called a proteome. The proteome is the counterpart of the genome. Our DNA remains the same throughout our lives, but our proteome changes. This explains how the grown-up flying butterfly can become something so distinct from the young crawling caterpillar it once was.
Few proteins work alone. They interact and form relationships with each other, and the nature of these interactions changes over time. You could say proteins have their own social network, just like us. Some proteins have lots of friends and contacts, while other proteins only have a few. Sometimes, a protein will break up an interaction and start looking for a new partner.
With approximately 10 billion protein molecules, one single cell has an interactive network that is as complex as that of all humans currently living on planet Earth. These protein networks determine the health of a cell, and thereby the health of the entire organism they are a part of. So it is easy to understand that the study of these proteins and their relationships is crucial. This study is called proteomics.
Understanding how cells work has made it possible to develop revolutionary drugs that are more effective and have fewer side effects. To detect and identify different kinds of proteins, we measure their unique fingerprints with a technology called mass spectrometry. This technique can determine the identity and, indirectly, the function of proteins.
The process involves shooting charged protein molecules or fragments thereof into a vacuum tube and measuring how long it takes for them to fly to the other end. This flight time depends directly on their mass. Another way we learn about the molecules is by making them collide with gas molecules, which causes them to fragment into smaller species. By measuring the mass of the fragments, we can determine what the protein's building blocks are and can thereby identify it. In one single experiment, we do this for tens of thousands of proteins and roughly 1 million fragments. This meter shows the huge amount of data we are constantly producing by measuring proteins. Gigabyte after gigabyte. This information helps us to precisely identify proteins and the social networks in which they exist.
But proteins are not unique to humans. Every living species on Earth is built up of proteins. Jellyfish, polar bears, tulips, and even bacteria. For this reason, study of the proteome will ultimately lead to better knowledge, not only of diseases and the effectiveness of drugs, but also of how plants can adapt to dry or salty environments, and how we might eventually be able to combat bacterial resistance. Excitingly, in recent years, scientists have learned how to reprogram the proteome of skin cells in a lab and turn them into stem cells. In other words, scientists are now able to tell cells what to do. For instance, regenerate tissue or repair a damaged organ. New therapies for a healthier society are on the horizon due to the fascinating research of proteomics.
All right, so this very nice video made by Dr. Albert Huck and his team from Netherlands, explaining the how proteomics can cover various spectrum of problems and how it is very important to study the protein at the omics level. So I hope by now we are clear that we are looking at a large number of proteins and their properties, which can provide us the much bigger picture or the integrated view of which are all processes happening in the cell. So for instance, like what is the expression level of these proteins happening, how the proteins are getting modified because of the post-translational modifications, how the enzymatic regulations are happening, how the proteins are getting activated or inactivated, how various type of biomolecular interactions are happening. All of these we want to study under proteomics. So if you ask that, what are the goal of this field, are still very challenging and very diverse. When sometimes people want to just look at the sequence of a given protein or the peptides, sometimes they want to know how my given protein is different from the healthy versus disease condition. So the quantification of the proteins, or look at how the proteins are getting modified, what is the activity chain of the given protein, how the proteins are interacting, which or cell they are actually belong to, which is the subcellular distribution of these proteins. So many of these things are actually part of this one field, which is proteomics. So broadly, we are looking at even a single cell, and if you look at various type of activity happening, which you want to capture under the protein ligand interactions, or how the proteins are forming the complexes, different type of protein families, which is giving rise to different activity or structural forms, various modifications happening. So all of these are happening simultaneously. And this actually gives you some recall of the cell structure, which we talked to you about a eukaryotic cell, where we have this plasma membrane and the nuclear membrane. And now in between, we have various type of organelle, including some of the endoplasmic reticulum and the ribosomes on that. So this gives you the refresher of the cell concept, and also showing that how different other processes are getting governed in this particular cell. So from the DNA, now this, the transport is happening, which is now the RNAs are going to get formed on the ribosomes. And now many of these molecules are going to go out from this cell, from the plasma membrane, and going to interact and distribute that information to other cell. So many of these things are very complex, and that's why understanding life processes and diseases are not easy. Even in current state, when every time when you hear about the coronavirus and look for the SARS-CoV-2 strains, looking at the vaccine things, to somebody else who is out of the field can think about why the process takes so long time. But given the intricate nature of these complexes and these biological issues, I think you cannot mimic these things very easily. You have to really study those processes in detail for a given organism. Then only you can be more precise. And given that we do not have any prior background information for SARS-CoV-2, it is not immediately possible for people to deliver the products right away. So studying proteins overall is challenging, given that, as I said, that we do not have a technique like polymerase chain reaction, where you can amplify your protein of interest and study them in detail. Proteins have there are 20 amino acids, so side chains are many. You have different type of chemistry, different type of affinity they show. They sometimes form the multi-complexes, they have multiple subunits, or they interact with other molecules, they get modified. So studying protein function also is very, very challenging. And generating proteins to do many experiments are very difficult, because each time you have to extract the proteins from a given sample type, or you have to purify a given protein using the heterologous protein expression purification system, All of those are quite challenging. And even if you have purified a protein and you want to study the protein, or you have extracted the complex proteome and you want to study that, you can't store them for very long because they might get degraded. You will have the loss of the functionality and the functional integrity. Many of these challenges of the stability issues also make studying the proteins very, very complex. And of course, these are very dynamic molecules, so they are going to not be very static. So if you are studying in one condition, and if you want to really understand the whole system, you can't just get the entire picture. You have to study various time points of that biological system to study how proteins are changing in the dynamic environment. And therefore, as you can see in this particular picture, that genome is quite static, which is interacting, giving rise to RNA form, and then interacting sometime with the protein DNA formation as well. Then there is a metabolites which is forming in the body as well, which is also interacting with various other biomolecules. All of them are getting governed with environmental factors, which is the behaving the phenome or the phenotypes. So therefore, understanding biological process is quite challenging. Many interplay of these dynamic molecules, and especially dynamic proteins with the protein interaction network and protein modification networks, they play a very crucial role. So if you think about, you have studied, of course, protein chemistry, protein biochemistry in the past, and I'm talking about some new omics things like the proteomics. What is changed? What has changed over the time period, which has led to development of these technologies? So main change was genome sequence project got completed. So we first time got an ability to look at which are all DNA genes molecule present in our body. And so as a process, now we were able to make the good databases and softwares to analyze the omics data set at genome level. There are many technologies which have been continuously developing, continuously evolving, especially mass spectrometry is one of the major workhorse of the proteomics field. It has seen a lot of development, and especially how to ionize these peptides and move them into the mass analyzers. That itself was a very challenging process. And there were 2 Nobel Prizes given for the just for this part of soft ionization techniques, which is electrospray ionization and matrix assisted laser desorption ionization, or MALDI. So again, these developments were also part of the trajectory which led to develop the field for studying just one molecule from protein chemistry to studying thousands of proteins simultaneously in the field of proteomics. So just to give you the nutshell and the picture, when we talk about protein chemistry, you are looking at one protein studying at a time in a test tube. When we talk about proteomics, we are looking at complex mixture of the protein, could be thousands or 10,000 in high throughput study we want to do for that. Protein chemistry, you are looking at the structure of a given protein or its function. But in case of proteomics, you are looking at how proteins are identified, how you can quantify them, and how you can characterize them, all in high throughput manner. So protein chemistry studying is governed with the structural biology field, whereas now the new field has emerged to study the proteins in the complex environment, that is systems biology. And advanced sequencing was one of the key technology which was giving a lot of boost to the protein chemist. Now, and of course, X-ray diffraction and other kind of technologies. But now mass spectrometry has become one of the major workhorses in proteomics. Not to say there are many other technologies, including microarrays and 2D gels, many other techniques as well. But these are kind of giving you the comparison, how the field has progressed to study the proteins from basic protein chemistry to the proteomics. So what we are looking for understanding a given, let's say, human body, and if you want to look at all its proteins, it's really complex process. It's not simple, not straightforward. What we are looking at right now is the different level of information which you want to obtain, starting from looking at the genome, looking at the transcripts, which are very dynamic, and then finally how the various type of modified forms of the proteins are formed. So all of them you want to study, and therefore still we have not been able to achieve analyzing all the complex proteins. So as I said, the field of proteomics has come into development with the various type of innovations happening, especially different type of soft ionization techniques in the LC-MS based approaches, which was really the big boost of the field. Simultaneously, there are many type of sequencing projects gave rise to these blueprint sequences in the databases. And now there are more and more chip biosensor approaches that are coming forward. And as we were going through the trajectory, now we also have the draft human proteome maps. So this was one of the major boosts of the field, how you have seen the entire journey to study the amino acids to the proteins and different type of protein and the complex proteome formation. But now what is the end point of this was that can we know which are all proteins present in human body, and that's where studying the human proteome was one of the big project, which a draft of the human proteome was published in 2014 and 2015. Uh, Still, it was not complete draft. Very recently, now we have the more high stringency blueprint of the human proteome, where we are also involved from the India side to part of this project, where now we have 90.5% of the overall proteome deciphered for the human. It's still not 100%, but at least we have quite a stringent criteria which we have used to analyze the proteomics data. And from that, we know that at least there are 90.5% of the gene coding protein sequences can be identified using mass spectrometer. This is slightly complex slide. I will not go in much detail, but what it says that we are now using very highly stringent criteria. PE1, we are looking at protein existence. There are some guidelines now being deciphered with the Human Proteome Project. Based on that, large number of proteins are really falling into the highly stringent criteria now. And there are some protein for which we do not have direct evidences from the mass spectrometer, but we analyze them using the transcript information. So these are indirect information. That's why they do not come into the main category of PE1. So still we have quite a few protein which we have no idea that are they really present in human system or not, and those are known as missing proteins. And these proteins, many of them belong to different type of olfactory receptors, some of the transmembrane proteins, different type of proteins, including the testis and the sperm proteins. So many of these proteins, we still have only prediction that the genes are there. So possibility is that RNA and proteins are going to be formed, but still we do not have any technology which can show that these proteins are actually present. So there is still a lot of scientific challenge to decipher some of these group of proteins. I'll end this by showing you this particular proteomics timeline, which recently we made this video, which depicts at how different type of innovations in proteomics, starting from very recent one to show the draft human proteome map, and going really back to the original innovations, that how this whole field has evolved in just 3 minutes time. All right, so this is actually, as you can see, large number of discoveries, which is put together by the group of scientists from Human Proteome Organization, HUPO. And in the short time, you may not have idea for all the details of these discoveries, but you can go to hupo.org website, look for a proteomics timeline, and each one of these discovery, a lot of details have been provided to show that what exactly work was done for which it has been listed as a milestone. So you can get some of these details there. But broadly, what today, I'm just trying to connect the dots from the last week's lecture and where we are today. Last week, we focused mainly about the cell structure and looking at the DNA, RNA, and some of the these basic genome-based technologies. And now we are progressing forward and we are looking at amino acids and proteins and the complex proteome, which is giving rise to the central dogma, which is quite crucial if you want to study the complex diseases and processes like, for many of the disease, you want to identify some specific biomarker, which could be indicator of that given disease. Like, for example, prostate cancer. You want to measure one specific protein like PSA, prostate specific antigen, and then you can be sure that the person might have the prostate cancer. Likewise, I mentioned that for the breast cancer, now you have different subtypes. So one particular molecule may not be able to tell you that this is what subtype of these breast cancer these women may have. So now you have the subset of the markers which could indicate that this is ER positive, PR positive, HER2 or triple negative. Those kind of subtypes can be derived based on subset of markers. So again, these markers are very guiding principle for the clinicians, which can help to diagnose a disease early, or also sometime to give the progression of a disease and understand how a disease is progressing or how a therapy is working, in a given context. So to really understand the physiology, to really understand the physiological context, we cannot say that which molecule is most superior, which molecule is to be focused on. Of course, different scientists, different groups have their own interest, different focus. We mainly work on the proteins and proteomics field, but of course, equally important are genomics and transcriptomics. But where all of us are trying to move forward is trying to integrate the data set. So even if I'm working on a given cancer project where we are generating the protein level information at the proteome level data, we also want to get if there is a genome sequence available for those cancer, and then can we try to integrate the data that which genes were actually getting modified or mutated and which proteins are now forming or getting malfunction because of those mutations which are happening. So can we integrate that data? And all of this is happening in a big manner in the field of system biology, which is going to give very integrated view of the physiological processes, which is going to derive more meaningful information for the physiology and medicine. So overall, I hope from the last week to till now, I'm able to convey you that we have really moved quite ahead in biology and overall omics field when we are looking at from the classical genetics of Mendelian genetics I talked to you and the genomic technologies like various sequencing methods, and now we are progressing towards the protein and proteomics. All of these are in the central dogma form of the life, but a different level of molecules, different level of complexity being introduced. Therefore, we need different type of technologies to capture these kind of dynamic molecules. And also, the challenges are immense here because the proteins are forming networks. They're part of different pathways. How to really understand them in totality are still challenge, but if we can understand them for certain processes, it is going to give us much more meaningful information to understand a life science system or a healthcare system, or especially various complex diseases to say. So I hope you are now charged and motivated to venture into this particular area when you are going to start with very basic about taking some protein and the maybe mixture of the proteins, try to analyze their sequences using technology like mass spectrometers, and then try to see like these proteins are forming networks with which other proteins, which pathways they belong to, what is known about them, how they correlate with other type of organism. A lot of things can be done even while sitting at home, or while giving exercises to the students in the classroom, just by giving a short data set from this to do multiple analysis. And of course, when we do these kind of actual experiments in the lab, let's say for a given cancer project, when we have 200 patients samples, and for every sample we are generating maybe 5,000 proteins. So think about the matrix, the Excel sheet, how that will look like. You got 200 patients and you got 5,000 proteins. Of course, it's not match data set. As Professor Sanjeev Sabnis mentioned, the stats professor last week, that to cater this kind of data set, you have to come up with different statistics. But that's where we need different mindsets, people of different background, different specialization, who can come forward and try to use this information and give more meaningful insights. And therefore, tomorrow we have invited Professor Graham Ball, who is going to now take some of these key pathways and networks which we are identifying, and how to make predictions for those based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. So he will give you more insight in his session in tomorrow. But that's all for the first lecture. Thank you very much for staying here, and I'm very